Hello and welcome to Public Sector I Heart You podcast. I'm Manny Sandhu, Director at West Midlands Employers, and I'm pleased to invite our special guest, Shoshana, from the Fairy Job Mother. Hi Shoshana, how are you?
I'm doing good, how are you?
Good, thank you. Could you tell us just a little bit more about how you've ended up becoming the founder of Fairy Job Mother and what that's about?
Yes, I'll try and keep this brief. But essentially, my Fairy Job Mother is my business, and we're essentially on a mission to empower young people with the skills and confidence to thrive at work, and also working closely with managers and leadership teams to help them engage and inspire the next generation of leaders. And I started doing that around 3 years ago, but kind of in a different sense. So initially I started my business as essentially a side hustle, mainly due to my frustration, just how confused I was as a young person starting the world of work. Obviously, when you finish education, you're kind of just thrown into the working world, and it can be quite confusing. There's no one telling you how to navigate certain situations or how to deal with responding to feedback and various things.
We're really keen to understand how we can attract more Gen Z into local government. And once they're in local government, how do we make sure that they're thriving, they're developing, and we retain their talent? So can you give some of, I suppose, Gen Z that might be searching, looking for their roles, some kind of advice in terms of how to align their kind of values and what their purpose is with actually finding the right opportunities?
I think that's a really good question, because I think most young people don't actually think of even doing that. Most young people are just like, well, I need a job. I'm kind of interested in this, or I've heard about this, or my mum and dad have suggested I do this, and they kind of move from there onwards. So I think that's a really good point. Before actually looking for a job, take some time to sit down and think, what am I actually interested in? What are some of my core values? What do I want in a job? What do I not want in a job? And even maybe write some non-negotiables. So when I was looking for my first job, I wrote kind of 3. I'm going to actually have to try and remember what those were. I wrote some non-negotiables down. And the first one was I knew I wanted to work in the technology industry. So I actually studied marketing, but I specifically knew I wanted to work in marketing, in tech. So that was my non-negotiable. Wasn't even applying for any jobs outside of that. My second one was that I really, really wanted to travel in my role. And my third was that I wanted to be earning a certain salary, because I'd done a year in industry previously. So I knew I wanted to be earning more than I did in my year in industry. So those were my kind of 3 non-negotiables. And they were actually really helpful for me, because they helped me determine what opportunities were even worth me investing my time in and what weren't me worth investing my time in. So I think even just taking some time to have a think, because it can be, easy to forget or even not realize that it's really important that you don't just find a job, but you actually find a job that you're going to enjoy, you're going to like being around the people, and you're very much interviewing companies as much as they're interviewing you. So it's also important to know what you want, so you can interview those companies and figure out if they're going to be a place you're actually going to be happy in. Because the worst thing you want to happen is you spend months and months looking, you finally get that job, you start doing that job, and it's not what you expected, and you end up leaving a few months later.
Absolutely, and I really like that element. It is a two-way process, two-way interviews, and doing as much research as you can, and to understand the values of the organisation as well, to kind of see, actually, does it meet what I'm looking for? So that's really helpful. But sometimes individuals, and especially those in Gen Z, are worried about actually filling the gaps in their experience, and actually feel that that's quite overwhelming, and you invest a lot of time in the application process. So do you have any kind of insight to help them around how can you share your soft skills and your potential when it comes to those applications and interview skills, so that employers can see, actually, there's a really good candidate here, but they may have employment gaps in experience, but that's okay.
Absolutely. So I think first and foremost, you've just finished education. So realistically, no one expects you to have years and years of experience. Employers are actually more open to that than you think. Equally, a lot of the time, a common theme I see in a lot of the young people that I work with is they'll come to me and they'll say, I've got no experience, and they have loads of experience. Just because it's not directly related to that role, they think that experience doesn't count, but that's actually not the case. In any role, whether that be retail, whether it be hospitality, there are going to be key transferable skills. So pretty much every job posting you see, they're always looking for good communicators. They're always looking for team players. They're always looking for people with those skills that you 100% would have developed in any role. So it's not about having direct experience. It's about maybe taking the experience you do have. Even if you haven't worked before, have you been involved in sports teams? Have you been involved with group projects at school? Have you been a prefect? It's about looking at those experiences you do have and figuring out how you can position them to make them relevant. So looking at some of those key soft skills like communication, like teamwork, and making sure those are front and center on your CV, and explaining how you use those skills in whatever experience that was to achieve specific results. Because at the end of the day, employers and organizations are looking for people that can deliver results because they want to hire you to solve their problems. So don't just list your responsibilities. Your CV's not a job posting. You don't just list them, I did this, I worked on the tills. It's like, no, okay, what did you do? Did you, communicate with 100 plus customers a day, generating an average of, £1,000 sales a day using the tills? It's like, how can you look at that skill and how you've used it to generate a specific result? Because we all have more experience than we think. So I think just not disregarding your retail, hospitality or other experiences, and really believing that they are actually relevant. It's just all about how you position it.
Brilliant. Thank you. And in terms of that positioning piece as well, I'm got keen to understand from your perspective, once individuals are in an organisation and you've secured that dream job that you really wanted to get, it's still an overwhelming experience, and we all have fresh ideas, things that we want to bring to the table. So how can we encourage those ideas to come through, but while still adapting to what some of the cultural norms would be within an organisation? Because sometimes we hear that there's a real frustration from Gen Z that are in the workplace. We've got ideas, we've got new ways of how we want to do things, but they're just not being listened to by managers. So how do we change that?
Really good question. I think first and foremost, it's all about knowing the right time and place to kind of bring feedback and ideas up. Realistically, if you are just joining your job and you're in your first week or in your first month, that's really learning time. It's 100% write your ideas down, pick out kind of process improvements that you think will be good, but maybe it's not the best time to bring them up within your first month or first week, because at the end of the day, you don't know, you've not learned what you're doing. You don't know what the job entails. And chances are a lot of these things that you've picked up, they may not look how they look right now in a few weeks or a few months, because you would have learned the grips of the role. So absolutely, it's really important to 100% write your ideas down, and write any process improvements down, but just kind of maybe start giving those when you're actually more in grips with your role, and also when is appropriate to deliver them. Probably not in a meeting with senior leaders where your whole team is there and your manager's there. That probably wouldn't be appropriate. A more appropriate way to do those would be in a team meeting where it's just your immediate team, or during a one-on-one with their manager. I think when you're starting your first job, you don't necessarily understand some of those workplace politics, or some organizations I work with, their graduates will literally message like company CEOs on Microsoft Teams and like try and schedule meetings with them. And it's just like, that's great ambition. We love that. But it's also doesn't make sense. Or they'll try and schedule meetings with their manager's manager without even mentioning it to their manager. And like, there's no malice behind it at all. But you need to understand that if you schedule a meeting with someone that's senior than your manager to tell them about a problem or talk to them about something, that's going to look really bad on your manager. So almost just taking time to think, it's absolutely fine to do these things, but think, are they going to be a bad reflection on my team? Should it be a conversation I have with my manager first? But again, you don't know these things. It takes you a little bit of time to learn these things. So I think those would be some of my top tips.
I think that's really helpful. And it's like you've said, it's that taking the opportunity just kind of to learn how things are working, and therefore actually what's the best way that I can navigate. But on that learning piece as well, sometimes social media is a great tool, and I think you can use social media to kind of get an idea, flavour for what an organisation's like, what a job could be like. But at the same time, sometimes social media can start portraying a picture of jobs and how quickly you can progress in jobs, and that's just not realistic in majority of cases. So what advice do you have for the listeners out there that might be again searching for their next role around some of that kind of myth busting and what they see in social media?
I think definitely take everything you see with social media with a pinch of salt. There's definitely loads of great content, but at the end of the day, realistically, we all know what you need to say to get views. You either need to be controversial or you need to like make it luxurious or involve money or something. And there are lots of people that I know specifically do that. And if you actually, there's people that I know that create career content, and I know it's not, they're only showing the positive elements of their role. So maybe you'll see a video online of someone doing a degree apprenticeship and you'll see the fancy offices, you'll see what they've bought of their salary, but what they aren't showing you is the, you know, hours every weekend they spend studying because they're working whilst also completing a degree. So I think take everything with a pinch of salt and try and speak to real people if you can, real people that you can speak to either face to face or on a call. So if you want to learn about a particular industry or you want to learn more about if a job role is right for you, yeah, consume content on social media, that's great, but it may not be telling you the whole picture. So maybe alternatively going on LinkedIn and finding people at that company or in that job role and sending them a message and asking them their thoughts or asking to jump on a call with them, because most of the time people are, you know, if they can, they are actually quite willing to help you. Because yeah, there have just been too many situations where, you know, young people have seen a particular job role online and it's made out to be so amazing. And I think actually equally sometimes employers are also guilty of doing this because they're so desperate for people to apply. They focus on the amazing parts of the company and these are the coolest parts of the job that you'll do, but no one's actually talking about every job. There's not great parts and no one's talking about those things. So speak to real people and also ask questions when you're in the interview process. If a job opportunity seems super amazing or too good to be true, chances are it probably is. So maybe ask, you know, what are some of the not so fun parts or challenging parts to figure out if that's actually something you'd want to be doing. Because if, you know, you've not been told that you're going to be expected to work late every Monday and Tuesday and then you get the job and that's expected and that's something you don't want to do, then you're kind of in a tricky position. Whereas ideally, those questions and that information should have been given to you like within the process. So speak to real people and ask questions, I'd say.
Brilliant. No, that's really helpful. And in terms of, are there any other tips you'd give? I mean, there's so many tips there in terms of what individuals can do when they're searching for their first job. Is there any other tips you'd give in terms of really testing organisation around their kind of values and that purpose-driven approach?
I mean, I think just definitely asking really key questions at interviews and really using that opportunity when they say, do you have any questions, to ask anything you want to know about the organisation. Like some of my favourite questions are like, what's your favourite part about working here? What company value do you resonate with the most? Really tailored, specific questions throughout the interview process. And also, like, if something feels off, like you have a gut feeling, try and speak to some people because usually if your gut's telling you something is off, it is. So, yeah.
Shoshana, thank you so much for meeting with us today, and thank you to our listeners for listening to a podcast. This has been some really useful insights for our candidates that use our public sector jobs board called WM Jobs. We are, like I said, on a mission to attract and retain Gen Z into the workforce. So really all the tips that you've given today hopefully will resonate really well and will help them in their application and interview process for jobs in the West Midlands. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.